things to say about our speaker this morning. He has been here before, he has spoken to us. But I can only say a few things. If I say what he has been, it will take so long. So I will only say what he is. And the first thing I'll say is that he's a great friend of Kenya. And Mr. President, I say that because even when this breakfast was postponed, he still planned to come, and he came to give us our speech this morning. So that's a great friend of Kenya. He is a number of things. He began his career as a theologian, as an educationist. He has done so many things, but let me just highlight a few. Closer to home, he's been a governor of the Vodafone Safaricom M-Pesa Academy. Very close to home. He has also been associated with the UNICEF UK. He's been in BBC. He has done a lot with BBC. He has also been global head of citizenship for KPMG, and he is still the chair of the School of Oriental African Studies, University of London. He remains a professor of leadership at the Stephen L. Covey Institute at the University of Utah. He is a non-executive director of Saxon Bamford, the executive search firm, and is chair of the London Chamber of Commerce Black Business Association, also a director and trustee of the new National Education Institute. That is among many things that he is. But I'd like to say that we have a treat for you today in inviting our friend and a close friend of our country, the Lord Dr. Michael Hastings of Scarisbrick. If I can say that again, he is the Lord Dr. Michael Hastings of Scarisbrick, CBE. Please, let us give him a very big welcome as Kenyans comes to deliver the keynote address. Thank you.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, and your wonderful wives, fellow parliamentarians and friends from all over the world, thank you for having me with you. Mr. President, you might remember that in 2019, when I was last here at this podium, I made a request. I said then that in the United Kingdom, we were searching for prime ministers. We couldn't find one, and the battles worked their way out. I have another request this time, which is we now have too many formers, and we'd like to send you some. So, if you fancy a few lost sheep, I'm sure you can find a pasture for them here in Kenya. Can I also congratulate the choir on an improvement, may I say a marginal improvement. If I said an outstanding one, I'd be indistinct, but at least a marginal improvement. And can I suggest you go for Kenya's Got Talent and at least aim for a decade to get there? So it's a wonderful thing when parliamentarians sing. Let it translate into your decision-making. Exactly a week ago, the National Aeronautical and Science Administration of the United States, we often call it NASA, held what they hope will be one of their final hearings, first started in 1966, to try and understand this critical question: is there life beyond Earth? In fact, the last president, if I may mention Donald Trump, actually signed in 2020 a COVID relief bill, which included a paragraph in the bill, and I read exactly from it, a provision requiring US intelligence agencies to deliver an unclassified report on UFOs within 180 days, in the middle of a COVID bill. America has been besotted with this question of whether there is somebody out there who might be staring at us, and if they are they on their way? Who is it sending these crafts, of which there are 144 unexplained appearances since 1966? And NASA had its grand estate of scientists gathered last week, Wednesday, and they proclaimed on the issues. They left the question open, is anybody out there? Well, I have news for you, and I have news for our American friends. There is somebody out there, and his name is Jesus. And there is a God who is out there, and he already sits, as the scriptures say, circling the earth. The heavens declare the glory of God, says the psalmist. Space itself speaks his story. Through the marvels of the heavens, his truth is on tour in the starry vaults of the sky, showing his skill in creation's craftsmanship. Every day gushes out his message to the next, night by night, whispering its knowledge to all, without a sound, without a word, without a voice being heard, yet all the world can hear its echo. Everywhere its message is abundantly clear. What a heavenly home God has set for the earth, shining in the Superdome of the sky. And here's the wonderful truth of that great revelation that scientists are yet to grasp. He who made it all came to walk with us. He, Jesus, who cast the stars into the constellations, who made everything that we take joy in, he came to sit with us, to eat with us, to ponder with us, to be with us. And he has one great unanswered prayer. Let me read it to you. Holy Father, John's Gospel, chapter 17. I'm about to leave this world, and I am to return to be with you. And my disciples will stay here. But Holy Father, everyone that you've given me, I urge you, keep them in your name, so that they will be united as one, even as we are one. God, who sent Jesus, came as one to be with us, to be reconciled with us, to bring us to reconciliation with God. And his great unanswered prayer is that we would reconcile. I don't know if you followed the story also last week of Brian Johnson. Only these things happen in America. They don't happen in reasonable places in the world. But Brian Johnson, an American tech millionaire, has now spent $2 million a year on anti-aging efforts. It's all over YouTube. It details the experience where he's taking plasma from his 17-year-old son and translating the plasma through he who is 45 years old to his 70-year-old father. He's spending $2 million a year because he wants to experience eternal youth. He wants to be permanently in the present. He doesn't want to pass to die. And he hopes that by passing the plasma from his son to himself, to his older father, ultimately they'll all live forever. Well, I've got news for him too. The news, according to the poet Samuel Ullman, is the following. Youth is not a time of life. It is a state of mind. It's not a matter of having the right looks, red lips and supple knees. It is a matter of the will. Youth is a quality of our imaginations, a vigor of our emotions. It's the freshness of the deep springs of life. Youth means a temperamental predominance of courage over timidity, an appetite for adventure over the love of ease. It often exists in a person 60 more than a boy of 20. Nobody, says Ullman, the great poet from the 1940s, nobody grows old merely by the number of years. We grow old by deserting our ideals. Mr. President and fellow parliamentarians, you and I grow old when we give up on the most essential responsibility that sits on our shoulder. We are not here to aggrandize or empower ourselves. We are here to serve those who look to us to give them the shine of life. A man passed his 100th birthday just a week ago too. The older of you in the room will remember Henry Kissinger. He's turned 100 years, and in his 100th year, this American political leader signed the first copy of his book, Henry Kissinger's Leadership: 6 Studies in World Strategy. In the heart of the book, he adds a critical perspective as to what makes for effective, good leaders who lead nations like prophets, he says. He said this: leaders need to see less from the perspective of the possible than from a vision of the imperative. Let me translate that for you. Less from the ambitions set out in their manifestos, but more from the imperative that faces us. The global order, said Kissinger, the global order is being shaken by unrivaled regions of conflict, intensified antagonism between powers with conflicting claims of legitimacy. The only way, he says, for a future to emerge is that we put aside our divisions and we do relentless diplomacy. You'll know as well as I do that nations are lining up at the moment as to whether they do or do not support centers of conflict. We don't need to name them. We know them. They're all over our news channels. We watch them with grief and we feel the agony of lives destroyed. Well, it wasn't that long ago, 1955, when 29 nations gathered in Indonesia. Those 29 nations included many of Africa's countries, many emerging into new democracies. And at those 29 nations, there was a great debate as to whether or not Africa's countries face east or west. To whom do you look as the future emerges? Well, probably the smartest voice that was found to be gathered at that time was Kwame Nkrumah, soon to be Prime Minister of Ghana. And he rallied all of those present with the slogan, neither east nor west, we face forward. Neither east nor west, we face forward. For all of us, the big challenge of the facing forward future is the final F, forgiveness. Forgiveness. Because we cannot face forward if we do not forgive that which has transpired from the past. Forgiveness doesn't mean that the other person is right. But forgiveness liberates us. Forgiving other people is one of the greatest proofs of love. It's wiser to forgive and forget than it is to hate and remember. The practice of forgiveness is our most important contribution to the healing of relationships and to the healing and liberation of mankind. And Mark Twain, the clever writer, said this: forgiveness is the fragrance the violet sheds on the heels that has crushed it. Forgiveness is when I let you stand up, irrespective of the wrong, and still look you in the eyes with I say I need you. Because freedom only comes when forgiveness is birthed anew. I read a terrible story the other day called The Second Vulture. Some of you will remember the awful tragedy, not just of the fight in Sudan now, but the 93-94 famine. At that time, Kevin Carter, a South African photojournalist, a Pulitzer Prize winner for his journalism and his photography, took what was called the amazing shot. Some of you will recall this image of a tiny little girl, absolutely emaciated from lack of food and lack of water, her body bursting with her bones, desperate and broken, kneeling, crushed, trying to get to a feeding center, and all alone. Behind her, a huge vulture, waiting with its gnashing claws and its huge beak, about to claw her to pieces in order to eat what remains of her life. Kevin Carter took the picture. As he took the picture, he rushed away. "I had a flight to catch," he said. He appeared on a radio program, savoring his great feat, thinking that he'd made such an exceptional photographic moment. He only lived sadly for another few months. For Kevin Carter took his life. He became depressed and committed suicide. His depression started deeply when he went on a radio program and he was asked this question: "Why did you not pick up the little girl who was dying before you and take her to safety?" His answer was, "I didn't wait to find out what happened after the shot. I had a flight to catch." And the caller replied, "I put it to you, Mr. Carter, that there were two vultures on that day, and one had a camera." How easy it is for you and I to observe the tragedies we witness, to simply see them as the events of others' responsibility, to determine that actually, as we live, we didn't do it, so we're not responsible. But I have news for you too. You and I are responsible. We are responsible for those who suffer and struggle, who cannot find their way to freedom, because we may be holding back that critical key of forgiveness and renewal. For he who threw the stars into the skies and pleaded with his Father before he returned again that we would be one, reconciled to one another, in forgiveness, facing those we perceive to be our enemies, willing to put aside what we think of as our positions, laying down as he did the grandeur of our estate, and facing those we utterly dislike for the sake of our people, for the sake of our communities, for the sake of our nations, for the sake of our world, gathering together so that we may make peace a chance. The Roman philosopher Seneca, writing 400 years before Jesus, said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he's not permitted to prove himself." Adversity, conflict, and distress are our windows to exercise forgiveness. They are our space to stand